So hello, dear colleagues. I'm really glad to see everybody here at our webinar. So our webinar is just one of the series between Moscow International Academy and Anara company. And we meet once a month and discuss different issues related to English language teaching. Today, our topic of discussion and presentations is language assessment. And we have three speakers here today. So I'd like to just to introduce myself. My name is Evgeny Usachov, and I work for the Moscow International Academy as the director of the Institute of Linguistics. In our institute, we mostly teach and train teachers and participate in master degrees programs. The second speaker is Galina Sharonova, senior methodologist of Anara company. And our last but absolutely not least speaker today is Leo Sullivan, who is an expert in ELT teaching, the author of many books on ELT, and a recognized person, right? Before we get started, if you don't mind, would you just place in the chat the information about, say, the area of English you teach? I mean, mostly, do you work as a language school teacher, a university teacher, maybe state school teacher, or you combine all the roles? So would you mind just typing in the chat? So what area of English language teaching are you mostly involved? University, language school, language private or state school, or freelance or self-employed? Okay, yeah. One more area. Okay, thank you for your responses. We're just waiting for a couple of minutes when our participants have joined us. And then at 3 sharp, we'll start our webinar. Okay. Currently, I see just 3 responses. 2 people are university teachers and self-employed tutor. I would really appreciate it if you provide information. Yeah, I think it's important for speakers to understand the audience. Yeah. And maybe to adjust their presentations a little bit to your needs. School teacher, okay. Self-employed tutor. So we have, I suppose, a wide range university professor. Okay, thank you for your responses. Freelance tutor from Zelenograd. Oh, nice, Olga. Language trainer, teaching adults. Thank you, Alisa, for your response. Okay, thank you. I think it's the right time to introduce the first speaker. So our first speaker is Galina Sharonova. Galina, are you here with us?
Yes, sure. I'm here.
Oh, hello, Galina.
Hello.
Galina is a senior methodologist in Anara company. And as well, she does quite many her individual projects, I would say, dedicated to English language teaching and training. So Galina will speak about the issue of assessment, I suppose, in a more general term. Yeah. So Galina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Evgeny. So let me share my presentation with you. And actually, I need to share it twice to double check that you can see actually the presentation. So not the slides. Okay, good afternoon, my dear colleagues. I'm very glad to be with you today. Thank you, Evgeny, for introducing me. Yeah, today my talk will be on assessment as part of continuous development. So you see that, yeah, assessment does play a very important role in our lives, in teaching, in learning. Yeah, and today we will see how it can contribute into the continuous development. What's on the agenda? So first, we're going to revise some reasons for assessment, like why we assess students, and techniques to do this. Yeah, then we will also outline some ways we can do this. Well, ways, techniques, they have many things in common, and there will be some practical ideas, some examples from course books, and some, well, tools and principles that you can, and actually you should, steal from this presentation. Yeah, and also like the thread, let's say, of this particular talk will be to discuss how assessment actually affects overall continuous development of both teachers and students. And so I guess that it's a pretty nice plan, yeah? I have a question first to you, yeah? So what types of assessment do you know? So can you please write your ideas in the chat box? Yeah, thank you for your warm greetings. Thank you. Yeah, so types of assessment. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Olga. Yeah, formal, informal, continuous assessment, self-assessment. Oh, yes, that's really great. Summative and formative. Oh, well, that's great. Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, it's really nice to see that you are aware of all this key terminology. Yeah, so because you see, usually all this terminology causes some, well, difficulties. Yeah, and it's great that you are aware of them. I mean, of the terms. So then, yeah, let's just have a brief overview. Yeah, so assessment. Formal assessment and informal assessment, and what makes them different. Yeah, so any comments from you? Like, how can we distinguish between formal and informal assessment? Okay, hello. Yeah, so, well, formal assessment has been mentioned here. Tests are formal, yes, yeah, but what in particular makes them formal? Okay, yeah, tests, yeah, but like what sort of tests? Or what feature should tests have to make sure that this is formal assessment? Yeah, thank you, Anna. Yeah, when we give a mark. Yeah, so like formal assessment is all about grading our students. Yeah, and student is given either a report or a grade, and then there is a detailed description of their performance, their progress, their efforts, and so on. Yeah, informal assessment, it's something what we do without giving any grades, without completing any reports, and this is what we do continuously. So like informal assessment is also, and well, both formal and informal assessment are parts of this continuous assessment. Then it was also mentioned in the chat box, summative and formative assessment. What makes them different? What are they? How can we distinguish between them? Okay, summative and formative assessment. So first, I would like to hear from you. Yeah, so they were both mentioned. Okay, thank you, Yelena. Formative influences our teaching. Okay, yeah. Summative, I guess, also affects it. Yeah. Okay, one more message from you. Yeah. Okay, yeah, let me then share these definitions with you. So summative assessment, yeah, it's usually a test which we give at the end of the course, and students get a mark or a grade, and they do not get any other feedback. Yeah, and so usually these are end of year tests. Formative assessment, yeah, it was mentioned in the chat. So it does affect our teaching, because this is when a teacher gives students feedback on their progress, and also, well, this feedback is given throughout the course, because it can help us later, so to say, form the next steps. Yeah, we see like what students have learned well enough, what requires more attention, and also we can, of course, create an action plan, yeah, in order to cater the course to the students' needs, and also to make it, well, as much beneficial as possible. Great. Then one more, well, category, so peer assessment. Yeah, so it's when students give feedback to each other, to their classmates or peers. This feedback can be on language, on well, on the students' performance, learning strategies, and so on. Yeah, and it's a very, very important way to encourage peer micro teaching and collaboration in the classroom. It's always beneficial, really. And self-assessment, yeah, or well, self-feedback, when students decide like for themselves if they think their progress is good or not. Yeah, if their language is good or not. And this is also what we should definitely encourage. Yeah, and so because when our students are self-aware, if they are able to well, give self-feedback, self-assess, then it does help develop their autonomy. Yeah, so they are more, you know, they're doing things more consciously. Okay, very good. And also we have a few more things to consider. We will talk about them today. So portfolio assessment, it's like the whole portfolio of all the works that students have been creating, doing during the whole academic year. At some schools, portfolio assessment can be formal. Yeah, so when this final portfolio affects the overall grade for the whole academic year. In some schools, it's not. Yeah, it's done informally. However, as you may know, yeah, it can really help students if they want to change schools. Yeah, they have some evidence of work that they have done. So then also continuous assessment. Now, actually talking about all sort of assessment, yeah, we definitely mean that it should be done continuously. Yeah, we can't do it randomly out of a sudden. Yeah, so continuous assessment, it's something what is going on day by day on a regular basis, and it's very beneficial. Yeah, beneficial for the students and the teachers. So students realize, well, how they are progressing, and the teacher can see what has been done successfully, what they should do, maybe what they should change about the curriculum, and so on. And actually, there is one more question to you. What do you think? When should we assess our students? Just when should we assess the students? Jan, so can you please write your answer in the chat box? When we should assess students? Oh, yes, Anastasia, thank you. Always, yes, always. Yeah, Olga, yeah, it depends, but still always. Yeah, you see that if we mean formal assessment, then yeah, so there are certain stages of the whole academic year when we do this. Yeah, and well, our students, they usually know like when it will happen. They prepare for some, well, tests or some other works. Yeah, but as assessment can be done informally, then actually maybe even if we are doing it unconsciously, we're still doing it at each and every stage of the lesson. Yeah, like each and every lesson. Okay, great, thank you. And then assessment itself, of course, covers many things, yeah, that we may well suggest. Yeah, and yeah, before I get to the next slide, so there is the comment from Olga. If we mean that observing is a kind of assessment, I agree always. Yeah, observing, yeah, you always have a certain, you know, aim and a certain purpose for observing your students. Yeah, it's not just observing for the sake of observing. Yeah, so you're always on the alert. Yeah, monitoring what they are doing, yeah, what language they are using, and also how they are doing this or that task. Yeah, when it is grammar, yeah, thank you for this comment. But you see that we do not only assess grammar, yeah, we assess overall performance, like how students, how well students are aware of the language, especially target language of your lesson, and also we are monitoring how well they are using this knowledge. In other words, their language skills, and not only language skills, 21st century skills as well, how they're able to collaborate, to communicate. You know that when we prepare students for Cambridge exams, yeah, or well, any other international exam, we need to make sure that students are able to communicate. This is a very important criterion for assessing students' performance. Yeah, following their progress. Yeah, all good. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, thank you. And like students, as a rule, yeah, when we assess students, we ask them to do some tests, or maybe they can be some assignments, yeah, not just tests as such. And if we can revise briefly tests, yeah, then we deal with a placement test, then a diagnostic test, then throughout the course we have progress tests, and then achievement tests. Yeah, I guess that you all do this, yeah, well, all these tests, but there is something interesting, like a diagnostic test. If you do this with your students, like we do it at the beginning of the academic year, can you please write a plus in the chat box? So if you provide your students with a diagnostic test. Okay, nice to see. Yeah, thank you, thank you. Well, that's really great. Yeah, good. Yeah, okay. And yeah, thank you, thank you. And then like my next question is like, which assessment do you use and why? Yeah, so can you please write your answers? Like which assessment? The assessment, I mean the types that we have already discussed. Assessment and maybe tests. Okay, I see that you do a diagnostic test. Yeah, great. What about regular? What about regular progress tests? Yeah, do you do this? Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. So you're a very responsive audience. It's always great. So good, good. Thank you, Yelena. Yeah, okay, great, great. Thanks a lot. Then let's have a look at some well, particular examples of such test types, activities, and tools that we can use. So first of all, it's a placement test. And you see that like the main aim of doing it is to place students in the appropriate group. And practically speaking, when we deal with teenagers, adult learners, then we usually have like a big choice. Yeah, like all the course books do provide a placement test, but it's always pretty challenging to place young learners, yeah, like schoolers or primary schoolers in the right group. You know, some years ago, I was working as an academic director of studies, and I was working in a, well, big language school. And we, together with our academic team, we had a big project to develop placement tests for young learners. And it was really challenging. It was real fun, I would say. And as a result, we had ready-made placement tests. But you see that it took so much effort, really, so much time. Yeah, we were all exhausted. Then if your course books have some ready-made solutions, then it's really great. For instance, here you can see a placement test for the Look series for primary schoolers. And as you see, this placement test is pretty big. So there are tasks on grammar, vocabulary, listening, writing, reading. Yeah, so all the tasks. And well, some of them are designed in the format of international exams, and you can edit these tests. Yeah, so if you find them too big, too time consuming, you can of course make them much smaller and shorter in terms of timing. Also speaking, yeah, so we make the final decision about the group after the speaking part. So here, as you see, what they suggest, here we have some pictures, and students need to describe these pictures, to say what they see in the pictures. And when we are doing this placement test, then there is a great, you know, diverse range of the assessment criteria. It's very helpful. Yeah, and really, it's a very, very good tool. If you have to design placement tests, then I strongly recommend you to have assessment criteria. Yeah, and by the way, again, I would like to hear from you. A plus if you do such placement test when you teach young learners. Young learners, like the ones I mean, who are 6 to 12 years old. Okay, well, Elena, thank you. Okay, good. Yeah, but it's really, you know, challenging to do this. Then the next stage, yeah, diagnostic test. Where is this placement test? You can find it on the companion site. So the test is there. Then after placement test, yeah, it's a good idea that we provide our students with a diagnostic test. Usually we do it informally, yeah, and we do not sometimes necessarily have to have any specifically designed test for this. You can do it this way. You know that at the beginning of each unit, especially at the beginning of each course, there are some speaking activities that students should do. Here you can see an extract from the Perspective series for teenagers by National Geographic Learning. And as you see, here is the spread of the second unit, but all the units are built this way. And there is exercise 1, My Perspective, and students discuss the questions which are related to their background experience. So even when your students are doing this task, yeah, you may make it a little bit more complicated and complex. Yeah, you may ask them to come up with more questions, more follow-up questions, then to provide longer answers. Yeah, for example, you can say that, well, in order to answer this question, you need to speak continuously for 2 minutes. And then it's a good idea to record your students, or at least to take notes of the language that they are able to produce, on the communicative strategies that they apply. And then you can see what you can do, how you can adapt the course book to your students' needs, and maybe what you should supplement your course with. Well, also, if we move on, and talk about formative assessment, which we do throughout the course, and then we give feedback to the students' progress. It's also a very important part of the continuous assessment and continuous development. When we can do it? We can do it after tests, giving feedback on the students' performance. After self-feedback session, yeah, if you organize such sessions, it's really great, time consuming, yeah, but really effective. Then after some important assignments, I mean, these do not necessarily have to be tests. These can be essays, for example, maybe after some speaking activities. And like how we can do it, we can either write reports on students' progress, or maybe we can organize a feedback session. Maybe it can be a feedback session to the whole group, and you may discuss some common themes or common issues. Or yeah, you can do it individually, write reports and share these reports with the students or their parents. With young learners, this can be homeschool letters, you see, which are also edible, so you can add information. With teenagers, you can organize some feedback sessions. Then it can really affect the continuous development, because you, again, as a teacher, keep an eye on what is going on and what you should do, and your students and their parents, yeah, can see what they have learned and what they need more help with. Then summative assessment, it's something what we do at the end of the course, yeah, and you mentioned it. So, for example, this can be end of year tests, and you can see this extract from the new Close Up B1 Plus book for teenagers. So, and here the end of year test is big. So these are just a few extracts, but the test is much bigger, but again, you can edit it. And all the tasks are designed in the exam format. Now, unfortunately, for the writing part, students have no choice. Unlike in the exam, they need to write a review here, but anyway, yeah. And then, like, when we provide such assessment, we see the overall results of the academic year, and then you may make some assumptions and maybe some important teaching decisions for the next academic year. Yeah, well, for the same students who will be with you next academic year. And for your students, it's also a very good tool, yeah, very good way to see what they have done. So then also we mentioned formal and informal assessment. Yeah, and yeah, you had the right answers that formal assessment requires a grade or mark, and informal assessment does not require any marks. And so, as you see, like as part of formal assessment, again, we may have end of year tests. You can see the same test from the new Close Up book. But you see that as this level and this book is actually unique, because it can be used both for teaching the language, for like covering the level, well, developing all the necessary skills and language awareness, and also it helps prepare for international exams. So that's why here, yeah, if we can answer this question, how it can affect the development, then the results of this test can help us give recommendations to the students if they're ready to take this exam or not. Yeah, so like you kill two birds with one stone, actually. Informal assessment, yeah, well, it takes place all the time, even when we are not really thinking about it. So, for instance, at our, at some speaking activities, yeah, at our regular lessons. Here you can see an extract from the same book, New Close Up, and here is a speaking task in the exam format, B1 preliminary exam. So students are supposed to describe the pictures that they see. Yeah, so here is the exam task. And even when they're doing this task, they will not get any grade for this. It's informal assessment, but as part of their continuous development and continuous assessment, you can comment on it, yeah, like how well they have done the task. Then you can also refer to the exam assessment criteria. Then, as part of informal assessment, it's a very good idea to encourage peer assessment. They can also apply some criteria, maybe not all of them, and of course, self-assessment. Yeah, so students get more focused on where they are now and where they are moving, and well, what they should do about it. Yeah, and also the question to you is, well, do you do this? Like, do you give feedback to the students' performance, not just how well they have done the task, but like how well this task completion reflects their performance? Yeah, do you do this? Plus, minus? Okay, very good. Yeah, yeah, great, great. Yeah, because you see that, yeah, students do not only need to see like how well they have done this or this of that task. Yeah, not only like feedback on their language is required. Yeah, so it's also important to give feedback to their performance, and of course encourage self-feedback to get them more focused and more autonomous learners. Okay, very good. And last but not least, let me share the next slide. One more type of assessment is portfolio and project work. Yeah, and like if you teach schoolers, and now project work is like a very important part of our curriculum, not only English language curriculum, and students do it a lot. Some course books offer some ideas, some ready-made project works. Some books don't. But as you see here, I will show you a task, and actually you can, well, let's say, steal this idea, steal in a good, you know, in a positive meaning. So the new close-up books are also unique in terms of, well, the content. They have a very good task, which is live well, study well, dealing with students' well-being and teaching them how to live a balanced, nice life. So here, for instance, we have the focus on forming positive habits, challenging, limiting beliefs. Students do this task. They, of course, consolidate and practice the language of this unit, but also they, like the tasks themselves are more personalized because they refer it to their own experience. And then, as you see here, they have an option to choose from: project 1, project 2, where they need to, well, analyze their lifestyle, their habits, make an action plan, and then also share these findings with their peers. So students have a choice, which is also very good. Yeah, and then like by doing this task, we can encourage, yeah, this continuous, again, development, assessment of, well, everything what students have done. And also they can keep all these works in their portfolio, which is really great, not only for the sake of, you know, finally having an overview of what has been done, but mostly to see what they can do in their real life. Like, and then connecting language learning to their real life experience is always beneficial. Yeah, and then also when they collect all those works in their portfolios, then they see their progress, yeah, both in the language and in their life strategies, life habits, let's say. So then, as you see, today we have had an overview of different types of assessment. Then I have also shown you some ready-made solutions, and so something what you can also use in your lessons, some ideas, some tools. And I hope that this presentation has been beneficial and useful. Thank you for being very, very responsive today. On this slide, you can see all the contact details. Yeah, so if you have questions, comments, well, I'm always happy to hear from you. So thank you very much. Yeah, thanks a lot. Enjoy your lessons and assessment. It's not that scary, as you see. Yeah, and see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Galina. Dear colleagues, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to place them in the chat box. Okay, thank you. Actually, it's my turn now to continue this wonderful webinar. Once again, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Evgeny Usachov, and I work for the Moscow International Academy as the director of Institute of Linguistics. And mostly what we do, we teach and train teachers and participate in master degree programs for teaching English. So my talk today would be dedicated to online assessment. I'm going to share the screen with you. Okay, can you see my screen? Put a plus in the chat if it's visible. All right, and I'll put it in the in this mode. Okay, in the presentation mode. Just a moment. All right. So what we are going to speak about today is actually how to provide assessment when we teach online. Yeah. So as you see, my title is How to Assess Language Skills Online: Challenges and Solutions. So what I'm going to cover in my talk today, as Galina, I'll just first do a kind of revision of what you know about assessment very briefly. And then I mostly focus on different tools, and we will be speaking about challenges of assessing students online and some solutions. And mostly I will speak about my own experience of teaching university students in our academy with National Geographic Learning materials, actually the series Outcomes, and the educational platform we're using for teaching and assessment at the same time. And I'll also give you a brief overview of some other digital solutions which might help assess students online. So I'd like to start my presentation with a quotation by Carol N. Tomlinson, who said, "Assessment is today's means of modifying tomorrow's instruction." As you can see from the quotation, we don't provide assessment just for the sake of assessment. Mostly it helps us to improve our teaching performance and maybe improve our teaching methods and make our academic process more efficient on the one hand, and on the other hand, to help students acquire language in a better way. So Galina already asked you these questions. What types of assessments are you aware of? So I'll just summarize what is known, maybe speaking about 3 types of assessment. Actually, we have 3 types. First is assessment for learning, which is formative assessment. As you see from the term itself, formative assessment refers to students' progress while they are learning. Yeah, it may be lesson outcomes, unit outcomes, or mid-course outcomes. So it all depends what we want to assess for the sake of learning. The second type is summative assessment, as you see, and as the term involves, it's assessment of learning. Yeah, mostly we refer to progress tests or say mid-core tests or maybe final tests within the course. In a more global term, there's another type of assessment which we call metacognitive assessment, which is regarded as assessment of learning. So that means we do something, we're assessed, and we learn something. Yeah, mostly developing metacognitive skills, which is a key issue when we teach 21st century skills, because these skills, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, they are applicable to different fields of knowledge. So as you are all aware, in terms of language skills assessment, we mostly refer to 4 skills: listening, writing, speaking, and reading. And of course, we have some experience. I suppose everybody has experience in assessing the skills, maybe in face-to-face environment, or maybe in online environment. But you see, as our learning goes into online format, the approach to assessing the skills may be modified, because assessing every kind of skill here is a sort of a challenge. Maybe we are more, I would say, aware of how to assess reading and listening, because automated educational platforms allow us to do it, and pretty fast and efficiently. And it's harder to speak about productive skills assessment online, because there are lots of peculiarities and I would say some things, some matters which we have to consider. And of course, it involves some technical stuff. So before we get down to the solutions, there's a question on the slide, and I would really appreciate it if you place your ideas in the chat box. What do you think are the main challenges of evaluating language skills online? Those you might have faced already, or those you believe exist, yeah? What are the challenges when we evaluate students' language skills online? Any ideas? Yeah, I can't agree more, Anastasia. Internet connection, yeah, it matters a lot. So there are technical problems. Yeah. Any other? Cheating, yes, cheating is a common problem. Yeah. Right, we don't know what the students are doing. Yeah, technical mostly. Cheating, yeah. Yeah, tools to be used, Olga. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's vital to understand which tools we may use for assessment. Any other ideas? Yeah, holding their attention is difficult. Yeah, but in the assessment process, yeah, it's pretty important when they have to concentrate on the task and interpret the task properly. Students are sleeping. Yeah. Okay. It depends on the type of test you provide. Sometimes there is no time to sleep. The test is pretty fast. Yes, cheating. Can't agree more, Elena. Okay. So I'll turn to no feedback. Yeah. It's also very important, providing a good feedback on the student's performance at the test. Okay, I'll turn to my list. Okay, what I believe we face, first of all, when we test students online, it's a lack of control. Yeah. So when they are in the face-to-face environment, and it's pretty easy to monitor and to control what they are doing in the classroom, it's one thing, and absolutely different thing if they do the test online. And here is the issue of cheating arises. Yeah, I quite agree. One of the common challenges which teachers face. For instance, if it's a particular test or related to a particular course book, some students are pretty, I would say, skillful in terms of finding teachers' books and accordingly answers to all the tests the book contains. Yeah. Moreover, I faced another cheating experience. I had another cheating experience. A few years ago, we in our academy used one educational platform to assess students' progress. And the students were put in quite interesting situation that instead of having typical face-to-face English exam, we introduced the system of online assessment, and their speaking was assessed by means of the platform. So in terms of speaking, it was something like there is a dialogue, and you have just to when there is a gap, you have to just to speak in your microphone and provide certain responses to these dialogue phrases. But the cheating I faced was actually they were it was a kind of writing assessment, yeah. So they were given a piece of text which they have to read and remember, and then they'll have to say retell this text in writing terms, yes, just to rewrite it. What some of the most imaginative students did, they just copied the text from the test into the Google Yandex, address line or address box, and then they copied this text in the test answer. Yeah. First, I didn't notice that, but then I saw that unfortunately the test system doesn't block the opportunities to copy the materials online and then just paste them. Yeah. It was just one example of cheating. I suppose more or less each of you has faced some kind of teaching, especially if it's just say maybe speaking exam and they have lots of materials and you can't control if they are reading the text from paper or if they are just genuinely speaking, right? But we'll speak about how to deal with this issue. Yeah, you raised the issue of technical problems, yes, internet connection, or, students may pretend they don't have good connection and many issues here. But sometimes the systems we use just to test students are not so reliable. Yeah, that's why technical issues come. I think a more serious issue is it's pretty hard to assess productive skills online. Yeah, I'll be speaking about some solutions which exist or which actually have emerged recently, but still facing the situation when students can just cheat when they speak or write, make this sort of a traditional assessment less effective. Yeah. Moreover, what we need at times, and we face this challenge, we need to customize assessment systems to our needs, right? For instance, if we want to assess particular skills, yeah. And at times the issue is digital literacy. Some teachers are not just literate enough in terms of digital skills just to provide assessment. Yeah, these are the main challenges in my mind we face. So what about solutions? Actually, on the next slide, you see just 2 or 3 practical solutions, but in my talk further on, I'll share my experience with you, and I'll use some systems or exam systems which may overcome this trouble. Okay, so first, it's development of speaking and writing automated testing platforms. So in my talk later on, I'll introduce such tests you might be aware of, you might not, as LinguaSkill. It's an online test by Cambridge Assessment. And Language Cert. It's also an online testing platform which allows to provide summative assessment and kind of level assessment and some other options they provide. Another solution is personalized testing. Yes, actually, National Geographic Learning Publishing House as well provides, for instance, in our package, we have MyLT platform, which we use in Moscow International Academy. And there is a tool we're planning to use, which is called Exam Viewer. So it's a soft solution by National Geographic Learning, which allows to generate tests online. Yes, That's why you can generate a personalized test for every student. So the idea behind that, the system has a bank of questions related, for instance, to different units you have covered within your academic year, semester. And then you can pick up those questions, those tasks which you believe are suitable for a particular kind of testing. And each student gets a personalized test in terms of vocabulary assignments or grammar assignments or writing assignments, things like that, right? So if you've never used it, if you've never tried it, I recommend you just try one, at least a few times. Yeah, so these tests are available at another company as well. And to face the issue or to overcome the problem of cheating, some universities started using proctoring systems. Has anybody ever had what proctoring system is? Please type in the chat if you know what I'm talking about, or maybe you've experienced using the system. Okay, actually not, I see. Oh, some of you do. Tatiana, I suppose. It was a painful experience, Tatiana Repin, because I see your avatar. Okay, yes, okay. So what proctoring is? You need to install some software on your PC, on your computer or laptop. And actually, there are two types of proctoring systems. The first type is kind of automated proctoring system. That means that once you installed this program on your computer, so the system just controls, of course, by means of a camera, controls what you are doing. So, and actually, the teacher might see what you are doing. For instance, where you look and maybe what handy papers you may use. Yeah, it's one type. I would say it's maybe not less reliable and more reliable when there is a person who is a proctor, so who can access to your camera and who see and control your eyes movement and where you look and things like that. And if there is a violation of some rules, of course, there are some rules which you have to comply with before you do a speaking test. You understand it. If you cheat, you will be just disqualified. Yeah. For instance, LanguageCert company, they use this live proctoring systems when they provide online speaking exams. So there are experts and teachers who just in charge of or they are just proctors, yes, to check what students do. Well, it is being developed at the moment, right? And I believe in the nearest future, most of the speaking tests will be provided with proctoring opportunities. Of course, it's a matter of money, it's a matter of investment, and it's a matter of proper technology, but I believe it's not a distant future. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'll name some platform, just a second, right? In a moment. Okay. In terms of some platforms, because I'm going to share some experience with you of using National Geographic Learning educational platforms. You see two of them in the first line. The first is MyELT, and I'll just show you in a minute how in Moscow International Academy we use this platform and how we evaluate the students' progress. And there is a new platform which is called Everlane. New titles of National Geographic Learning are equipped with this with this platform, sorry. And if you buy, say, paper textbooks or digital textbooks and workbook from Anara, again, because Anara is an exclusive distributor of National Geographic Learning. So that means you will get access to this Everlane learning platform, which is kind of more advanced than MyELT in terms of interface, in terms of the options, and some other learning opportunities. The second way, as I said earlier, it's personalized testing, which I mentioned, and of course, some issues of the digital literacy. So now, briefly, I'll explain how we work in the Moscow International Academy. So we use the platform called MyELT. By the way, has anybody here heard about that? I know some students are here from the Moscow International Academy. They are either master degree students or so we have a program. Yes, okay, right. Some of you know what it is. Okay, so for the others, I'll just stop sharing this screen and just share our platform. Just a second. Okay, here it is. And I'll share the screen again. I believe you see it. So this is what the platform looks like. So you see some common operations and buttons, we can call it like that, than a teacher has at their disposal. For instance, I personally teach outcomes upper intermediate group. And we use digital books, digital textbook outcomes, and digital workbook, which are really handy and useful. So, and if I have an option gradebook, yeah. So if I click here, it's being loaded. So, and I see the results of different tests. Usually they are assignments in each unit. Yeah, in each unit, you just make some assignments, which just reinforce the material we study in the book, in the course book, for instance. And we see the results. Actually, what it gives a teacher who uses this platform a lot of reporting opportunities. So, for instance, if I want to get a particular report on my students' performance, I'm just click here and choose the type of report. So I'll pick up just two of them. For instance, if I want to know how much time my students spend doing every activity, I'll click here, time spent by student, and then click on create report. And you see, I see how much time each student spent on each activity. As you see, some activities are pretty easy to do, and it takes about a minute or so. But in some cases, it might be even longer. Yeah. So in terms of the students' activity when they do it. The second type of report, which is more, I would say, more informative, is the report how many assignments students actually have done and their scores. For instance, here I got a table when I have students' names, when I see when was the last time they just signed in the platform. Yeah, right. You know, it sometimes may happen when your students are mostly not adult by teens say, okay, I spent 5 hours on the platform, and you just check. He just signed in and spent, say, 10 minutes. Yeah, that's why it's a good way to make the parents informed how much time the student actually spent on the platform. Then you see the percentage of assignments completed. For instance, you assign them, say, 50 assignments. Yes, and is it 100% or? Okay, you see the score is pretty high. Yeah, the percentage. Instead of Gulfiya, who just joined the course not so long ago, because we have just only 1%. Then you see the number of assignments which students completed. For instance, the total number 142, and you see this person just has done 130. and she has just 12 left, and the average score. Yeah, you see the average score, how well they've been doing that. For instance, if we have criteria for an excellent mark, say it's 85% and higher, so this student deserves an excellent mark. And you see some are just underscored, 64, 50, and things like that. So I believe it's very visible, yeah. So you have the report visible, and you can share with the students if they underperform or overperform. And the system of assigning different exercises. So you just click on the assignments, you pick up a particular unit, and for instance, you see the assignment dates. So for instance, I assigned unit 7, which is about nature, on the 15th of January, and it's due on the 15th of February. So it gives us flexibility in terms of assigning and evaluating the students' progress. Well, and of course, the major advantage of that in terms of, say, assessment and checking what the students have done, it's it saves time dramatically. Yeah, you don't have to check every single exercise with a pen and paper, you see, but the system automatically does it for you. Yeah, I'm sure you are aware of some other platforms. Actually, in the academy, we have used a wide range. We used with MyLT by Pearson, and we use Cambridge LMS, right? It all depends what publishing house you work with and which materials you use. Right, but again, it's a good tool just to evaluate the students' performance in this way. So, and for your reference, I'd like to share some other solutions which you might try yourself, maybe after our webinar or when you have time for that. So I'll share my presentation again. Okay, so apart from those I mentioned, LinguSkill, yes, it's a Cambridge English assessment. It's not just a test, it's an exam. It's absolutely online, right? And it's not a high-stake exam, as they say. So that means if you do this test, it will just give you your total score in all 4 skills. But in terms of recognition, I don't think this result will be recognized by universities and maybe employers, but they are developing on the improvement, right, of this skill. The second is called Language Cert. So I'll put you the links in the chat after I finish. It's an examination system, and you can have a wide range of exams online. And there are certain advantages of this examination system. You get your result within 24 hours. For instance, compared with Cambridge exams, if you do them face-to-face, it takes two months to get the results. Yeah. And there is no examination session. You can sign up, for instance, for tomorrow and do the test tomorrow. You don't need to wait a long time. So Language Cert provides the exams firstly by universities who are part of this program, or just you can do it online, yeah, not through the university. It's optional. And one more platform I'd like to mention. I don't know if anybody knows or works on this platform. It's Vznania platform, which also provides a lot of opportunities for assessment, and it's more flexible. I don't have much time to speak on it, but we'll have another webinar. You'll get to know about it. The whole webinar will be dedicated to using Vznania for assessment opportunities. Yeah, believe me, it has a lot. Okay. So if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer. If not, as I promised, I'll place all the links in the chat later on. And if you have any questions, you can actually address me personally. Here are my contact details, right? So as well, you can contact me in Instagram. So my Instagram is at Yevgeny.Usachov, right? And any questions related to assessment or using educational platform, I will be more happy to help you. And I also recommend you visiting our Academy's website, which I work for, Institute of Linguistics. Yes, we have a range of products there, and this is the course we are doing with Anara. If you want to sign up, as well as having these webinars, you'll get some assignments on our educational platform, and at the end, you will be granted a certificate, as we call it, удостоверение о повышении квалификации установленного образца. For some reason, it might be important because, you know, teachers are supposed to do it every third year. Here are the contacts of our institute. And thank you very much for your attention, for your participation. Yeah. And I hope to see you soon in our further webinars. Thank you very much. Okay. And it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, who is Leo Sullivan. Hello, Leo.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, I suppose everybody knows Leo, who is a recognized author, LT Books author, an expert in the field of English language teaching, right? And today, Leo will be speaking about the issues of assessment. Okay. Welcome, Leo, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Evgeny. So let me just share my screen. I apologize. I'm for my voice. I have a bit of a cold, so not COVID. I got tested just yesterday, but a bit of a cold. So I apologize if my voice, if I sound a bit funny. So in my talk, we're going to talk about various alternatives that teachers have when it comes to assessment. So it's sort of traditionally seen when you hear the word assessment that we think immediately of standardized tests. But as you may know, standardized tests have come under a lot of criticism in recent, let's say, in the last 30 years, etc., because more and more evidence shows that they don't really capture students' ability, students' skills, etc. As language teachers, I'm sure you're all familiar with this phenomenon. You know, when students when students know certain grammar on grammar tests, yeah, when they're assessed on knowledge of, I don't know, present perfect or past simple, but when it comes to actually producing language in writing and probably more so in speaking, they fail to use grammar correctly. So, which again sort of underlines the inadequacy of standardized tests at fully capturing our students' abilities. So you may also have heard these terms, formative and summative. So these two terms refer to different assessment purposes. Now, these terms, oh, just a second, sorry, I stopped sharing my screen, my mistake. Here you go again. So these terms were introduced by an American educationalist, his name is Scriven, in the 60s. And since then, they have sort of become this staple of literature on assessment. Now, when he originally proposed these terms in his, it's very like a philosophical paper about the role of education in the 60s. So he actually was referring to formative evaluation and summative evaluation, specifically in relation to curriculum. So for example, so formative evaluation was described by Scriven as the ongoing improvement of the curriculum, and summative evaluation in order to enable administrators to make decisions with respect to the finished curriculum. Okay, so Another way of saying so that those terms have been later sort of expounded upon. So we normally tend to see these days formative and summative as sort of formative focusing on the process, and summative as focusing on the final product. Okay, so formative also sort of takes place during the instructional process while we teach, whereas summative is a summative assessment occurs at the end, after the instructional process has taken place. Now you may have, because there's abundance of terms and they're sort of like very confusing and sometimes overlapping. That's why sort of in the first part of this presentation I wanted to help you make sense of all these different terms that we find on the literature on the alternative assessment. So you may have come across also terms ongoing and or continuous assessment. So they're also kind of more or less, I mean, kind of, I'm oversimplifying here, but they also more or less refer to the same thing. Yeah. So ongoing and continuous assessment, they focus on the process rather than on the product. Feel free to ask me questions in the chat box if you have any questions, or if I'm going to, yes, thank you for wishing to get better. Yes. So if you have any questions, please, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat box. Okay. Now, another sort of metaphor to help you make sense of this dichotomy would be sort of looking at the summative assessment as you know, it's your attainment at the end of the process. So it's sort of looking at it as the as crossing the finish line, yeah, as opposed to formative assessment, looking at sort of the distance you have covered to reach the finishing line. So I hope that maybe this analogy will also help you make sense. Now, later on, this is already in the late 90s, formative and summative assessments have been sort of were reconceptualized as assessment for learning or an assessment of learning. So now we're talking about more already, this is sort of the British school of assessment, as called, it was known as the Assessment Reform Group, ARG, in the late 90s. So again, essentially, even though the labels are different, but more or less they refer to the same thing. So sort of to assessment for learning is formative assessment, and assessment of learning is summative. I mean, if you ask me, I think assessment for learning is an apt term, because it sort of emphasizes the role formative assessment plays in motivating students, yeah, towards achieving learning goals. This excerpt by Black and William, I think, truly sort of captures the essence of assessment for learning. I'll just let you read it quietly, and again, feel free to ask me questions. All right, so why I like this quote from Black and Williams, yeah. Because it really, as I said, captures the essence of assessment for learning and its formative nature. So, and it really kind of emphasizes the fact that assessment for learning, formative assessment, is not just sort of provision of frequent in-class quizzes and assignments, but it really is a powerful tool for of directing teaching and learning activities in order to shape learning. And in this paper, they actually show how incorporating assessment for learning really leads to significant learning gains, especially, particularly among low attainment students, which I think is also very important. Okay, so another way, again, sort of, I hope I'm not, there's not a bit of metaphor overkill here. Another way of of making sense of this dichotomy is seeing sort of as assessment for learning as provision of feedback in sort of in writing, as opposed to just a numerical grade, which is like, remember the finish line metaphor? Yes, you finished the line, you've made the grade, or you haven't. So an assessment for learning is usually realized through more descriptive feedback, which the idea of which is to help learners improve, not only to give them feedback on what they have, how they have performed, but also how they can improve. We'll talk about it in a moment. So these are the principles of assessment for learning, which I took from Black and William Assessment Reform Group. The only change I've made is I replaced the word pupils, because they are mainly writing. The audience was written mainly for the state school system, specifically in the UK. So I've replaced the word pupils with the word students, sort of to cover a wider range of learning scenarios. And because many of us are not teaching in the school system, many of us teach in private language sector. But it's still kind of, those principles still work, okay? All right, so moving on now, we talked about the different reasons why we assess. So there are what they call purposes of assessment, whether they are summative or formative, or for learning or of learning. Now, as teachers, we also have access to a wide range of assessment tools or assessment techniques, if you like. They do not always exactly sort of correlate with the purposes of assessment, but roughly, if we look at this range of different assessment tools, sort of, can you draw a line between sort of the formative ones and more summative ones? So which ones would be where, please feel free to type in the chat box, which of these would be considered formative and which ones would be considered summative tools of assessment? Okay, please type in the chat box. Okay, Anastasia, yeah, but which ones are formative? Are all of this formative in your opinion, or just, yeah, okay, so peer assessment, self-assessment will be formative, okay. Anastasia, final two summative, yes, yeah, okay, yeah, okay. So tests are definitely summative, it's sort of that's why I put it at the very end. Okay, could be both, okay, yes, now we're sort of, yeah, we're getting there. Okay, but what about, for example, projects? Would you say project is a formative or summative tool? Because normally you are assessed, after all, on the final result, on the presentation of your project. Okay, yes, Olga, yes, sorry, Alessia, yeah, mainly summative. So I kind of would divide them roughly like this, yeah? So the formative ones would be these four. There are many more, but this is just some examples, and summative would be the right part of this spectrum. Okay, however, as I said, it's rather simplistic, this division, because after all, when we talk about different assessment alternatives, they overlap, because there are many formative assessment tools which can also be used summatively, and there are summative tools which we can use also in a more formative way. And I would like to show you a couple of examples, and that's why I prefer the term alternative assessment, or even better, alternatives in assessment. So just to show you how many different tools we as teachers have access to, and we don't necessarily need to limit ourselves, to using one or the other one for formative or summative. They all overlap. Formative ones can be used for summative purposes and the other way around. So let me show you a couple of practical examples. So for example, this one, a longitudinal assessment of speaking. Longitudinal is as in assessing learners speaking over a period of time. So again, it's very common to assess learners speaking sort of by giving them some kind of like speaking tasks to perform in pairs or as a monologue, usually at the end of the course. But it can also be done throughout the course. You can also assess your learners on a ongoing, or continuous basis. So there are different criteria you can use. Also, it kind of overlaps with what we this elusive criteria known as participation in class. So when we want students really to assess their participation, but what do we really assess? How can we break it down? So can you please humor me? Can you provide some suggestions, some examples? When how do you understand the term participation? What sort of sub criteria would you include into under this umbrella term participation in class? Okay, again, I would like to hear some of your suggestions before I display my my ideas. Okay, yes, being cooperative in group tasks, very good, yes, okay. Staying on task, yeah. Very nice suggestion, being involved. Yeah, any other ones? All right, let me show you what some of my suggestions. And interestingly, I don't have these ones, and I think they're great. And you know what I will, what I like about this webinar is so that you should get a chance to learn also from other teachers, from your experience. So I will definitely adopt some of these. Speaking in target language, yes. Now we're getting closer to what I have in mind. Okay, so these are, for example, the ones that I normally use for breaking down participation in class, or actually what I call it's basically assessment of speaking over a period of time. So the first one is willingness to communicate. It's a very important concept. Unfortunately, it's not. It's been shown willingness to communicate actually implies readiness to enter into a discussion, into kind of discourse with specific people or specific persons. It's been shown that to facilitate acquisition of second language, so learners with the higher the learners WTC, willingness to communicate, they higher their chances of successful language acquisition, which again, intuitively, most of you would, it kind of makes sense. Yeah, the more you speak, in other words, the more you use opportunities to speak language, the more likely to acquire this language. So although this concept has received a great deal of interest in research literature, it's not normally featured as a sort of an assessment criterion, when we assess learners' oral performance in oral tests. But I think as a teacher carrying out assessment in the classroom, it's something that you can easily assess students on. Okay, so L2 use, okay, I think one of you has mentioned it. So basically speaking in target language, it was Violetta, I believe. I don't see your full names for some reason. My sort of chat box appears cut off a bit. So you see, I would not penalize them for using L1 because, again, as we know today, there's lots of also research that shows that the use of L1 can be beneficial in the classroom. So it's not sort of penalizing us for using L1, but rather rewarding them for using L2 when they have to use it. Asking questions, this criterion speaks for itself. No need to dwell on it. Making relevant contributions during classroom discussions, another criterion you can use. And also what I like personally, experimenting with language, because I like to see my classroom as a room for learners to experiment. So for example, when I've taught them a new grammatical pattern, yeah, or a new a lexical chunk, I would really like them to hear them trying to use it, even if they use it incorrectly in the early stages. But that's exactly what experimentation with new language is all about. And then based on their attempts to incorporate this new structure, I would give them, of course, feedback whether they do it correctly or not. So so these are just sample criteria you can use, and then you can use a simple, again, it depends if you prefer to use digital. I'll show you both paper and pencil and digital tools for doing this. So paper and pencil will simply look like this, and sort of draw a template with these 5 criteria, or again, feel free to use the ones that you suggested in the chat box, and then simply throughout the course add check marks, ticks to assess your students for doing or not doing one of these things. So, and this is what it would look like, for example, with a real class. So you can figure out by the judging by the names of these imaginary students where they come from. But this is, for example, you would see that Eleni really kind of, fulfills lots of criteria. She uses L2, she shows willingness to communicate, she makes contributions, etc. Okay, so this, of course, can be translated at the end of the course into her final summative grade, even though the evidence of her performance was collected on this longitudinal basis, over a period of time. I don't know if you're familiar with this tool called Class Dojo. So Class Dojo is one of those gamification tools you can use to motivate students for, I think it was essentially designed for young learners, because you see this invite Barbara's parents, so you can invite also parents. I've been using it successfully with learners of all ages without the parents component. So it comes with preset criteria such as creativity, great insight, hard work, etc., helping others. But again, you will see as many digital tools and as many, actually, as a lot of literature on assessment. They're not really specifically written for our purposes, of English as a foreign language. This is written with this general education focus in mind. So, but what you can do, you see this edit skills button, so you can easily edit those skills. So you can replace them with the ones that you would like to assess your students on. Okay, so these ones are these 6 are provided there by default. Yeah, and basically what you do, you throughout the lesson, throughout the term of study, course, semester, you click on them and you add points. Students get more points. So I've adapted them. Normally I've kept some, you will see. So, but I've used, again, ask questions from my previous criteria, attempts to use new vocabulary, that's the experimenting with language. You see I've added willingness to communicate, but I like there the preset one of great insight, and I've kept it. I mean, again, you don't have to use it. It's not something that you have to give points on. But so this is sort of a screenshot of of my of the assessment criteria I use in my class. And then at the end of, actually you can do it throughout the term. You can create those sort of progress reports that looks like this for each individual student to show. You'll see also they have this sort of criteria called need work, which is basically nice euphemism for negative, so for being disruptive, for being late, for coming to class unprepared. But again, it's up to you. You don't need to use them. If you want to use them, of course you use them, but specifically for this, for my purposes, for assessing their speaking throughout the term, or participation, as we like to call it, you can easily do with just the positive criteria. Okay. All right. No questions in the chat box, so let me move on. And let me give another example. So my first example was about how you can use the evidence collected over a period of time for summative purposes, yeah, to give students grade at the end. But you can also do the other way around. So test, which is normally something we associate with the summative assessment tool, yeah, at the end. But you can easily use it also formatively, so to help learners reflect on their learning and improve their learning. So I call it test wrapper. Some you will see some writers on alternative assessment call it exam wrapper. It more or less, you know, boils down to the same thing. So this is, again, you don't have to use all of this, but after giving students some kind of like a test, progress test, etc., you can give them this questionnaire. So some of the questions they have to answer before they see the results. So before you give them their scores. So you're asking them to predict their score. You can also get them to reflect on actually how much effort they put into studying. Yeah, what did you do to study? What did you find easiest? What was most difficult for you? And then after you've revealed the test scores, they can answer another 5 questions. Are you surprised at the score? How do you feel about it? What can you do to make it better next time? All right, so this has many sort of alternative names. You can use it, you can call it test trap, you can use it post-test analysis, you can use a test type feedback questionnaire. So you see, I'm all about giving students alternatives, and I'm hoping also giving you lots of alternatives here now. So another important component of this test wrapper, which you can use in addition to the previous ones or on its own, I call it learn from each other's mistakes. Because it's also very important. I mean, as a teacher, sometimes I do, and I'm sure you do as well, you sort of collect those recurring errors that many students make. Yeah, but by doing this, yeah, by getting students to do themselves, it will save you lots of time, so that you don't have to collect students' mistakes. You can still do, but essentially you can put students in groups, or you can turn it into a mingling activity where they sort of share with each other one silly mistake they've made, one question they thought they got wrong, but actually they got right, etc. So, and this way sort of helping them learn from each other's mistakes. All right, any questions? And this one is the same test wrapper on using Google Forms. So it's something, again, as at the end of a Google quiz, or Google form, which you can use for quizzes. Yeah, you can also add some questions like this. Yeah, so how did you did in the test, and how many, this was like a very short kind of, mid-term vocabulary quiz review, something on it, with only 10 questions. So, and again, you can ask students, how many questions do you think you got right, etc. Okay, so the different, going back to our different assessment alternatives, and as we said, we don't really care anymore about this formative and summative dichotomy, because formative tools can be used summatively and the other way around. And in fact, there have been many already this century, many different alternative conceptualizations of assessment proposed, mainly by different authors who are unhappy with this formative summative dichotomy. Okay, so, and there are several others alternative conceptualization proposed. I'm going to focus only on some of them. So one of them, for example, is known as dynamic assessment. Many of you might be familiar with the work of Vygotsky, the Soviet psychologist, and his sociocultural theory, which sort of made waves in the West only much later, only like in the 60s and 70s of the last century. So specifically his concept of what we call ZPD, zone of proximal development. So essentially dynamic assessment draws on Vygotsky's theory, and it involves observation and of the learner's abilities through this dialogic interaction with the teacher, who acts as a mediator. So, and in the classroom, based on the principles of dynamic assessment, you will not be able to tell assessment activity and teaching activity apart, because basically they're all sort of cut from the same cloth. Okay, you won't be able to distinguish them. And now this Canadian researcher, Lorna Earle, she proposed this framework called, she was also kind of unhappy with this assessment of learning, assessment for learning dichotomy, and she proposed another conceptualization, which she called assessment as learning. Now, it might sort of seem superficial, this change, you know, changing for learning into as learning, but she asserts that this allows us sort of to blur the boundary between assessment and learning, and sort of the role of the learner also comes to the fore. So the learner is not only contributing party to the process of assessment, but actually an important link in this complex interplay between assessment, learning, and teaching. And also lots of emphasis is placed in this framework to learners' ability to regulate their own learning, what's called self-regulation. Okay, and so a similar suggestion to reframe our understanding of assessment also has come from the proponents of learning-oriented assessment, LOA. Yeah, so they suggest even the more holistic, more integrative view of assessment and learning. So not only do they reject this formative, summative dichotomy, they acknowledged and recognized the value of all kinds of assessment, whether they're summative or formative, whether they're formal or informal, and how they feed into the learning process. It's also important, they also see learning as a lifelong process. And I think it's very important, particularly in our context, in context of language learning, because language learning is essentially a lifelong process, and particularly important today in many professional contexts for our learners. Okay, so based on this, different conceptualizations, we can sort of come up with the following main principles of alternative assessment, yeah, and they are as follows. So first of all, the alignment of instruction and assessment, yeah, as we've seen from these various different conceptualizations I mentioned in the previous slide. So most learning activities serve as assessment activities, and assessment activities serve as learning activities, this way forming this continuous feedback loop. So many assessments can be easily integrated into learning activities that you do on a daily basis, and the other way around. Many assessment activities can be used for learning purposes. Student involvement is a very important principle in the assessment process. So it's a very kind of common term, like active learners. Learners should be active learners, but also learners should be not only active learners, but also active assessors of their learning, and not just passive recipients of assessment provided by teachers, because this would not be compatible with the notion of life learning. So again, what I mean by active participation in assessment, it can start with simple self-grading. Yeah, so give yourself a grade before teacher gives you a grade, or reflection, like something that we saw with by test wrapper example. So a reflection on your performance. And of course, then it can extend to more complex stuff, such as, you know, devising your own assessment rubric, or negotiating assessment rubrics together with a teacher and with your peers. Okay, and finally, feedback. Feedback plays, of course, a crucial role, as I already mentioned, in this learning assessment continuous cycle. But in order to be truly formative, feedback should not only include comments on learners on their performance, yeah, but also provide guidance as to what they should do next. Okay, and because this term feedback kind of implies a more retrospective view, looking back, so some authors have suggested this term feed forward. So I don't know if you've heard this term, but I guarantee it'll become your new favorite term after this webinar. So feed forward, because again, it's sort of more apt. It captures really this forward-looking function of the feedback we give. So for example, to give an example, again, writing task, when you correct students' errors, yeah, directly or indirectly. When I say directly, you mean you actually correct the mistakes, so indirectly you tell them, okay, find the grammar mistake here, correct your grammar here. So this is feedback. But if you want to provide feed forward, you may want to include things like, yes, you used this used correctly, but you can find a better collocation with the word goal here. So look it up in a dictionary, for example. Or you tend to use a lot of simple sentences. So perhaps try to use more complex structures with which. Yeah. So encourage learners to use more sophisticated, to incorporate more sophisticated writing, like clauses. All right. Okay. Now, as I mentioned already, a lot of literature on assessment and assessment for learning, assessment as learning, has been written from the perspective of general education. So, things like maths and sciences, etc. But there's not so much that's been written about specifically about English language teaching. So here are some principles that I consider very important for us as language teachers. So some specific principles, in addition to the ones we saw earlier, that would be very important. Sort of, I indicated them as sort of transitions that we need to make in order to truly assess our learners' skills. So from discrete grammar items to using grammar and vocabulary, because as we know, these two always work in conjunction to convey meaning. Shifting focus from word meanings to vocabulary use, and from teaching skills to teaching language as a basis of skills. So again, let me show you how these three principles again should be applied in the classroom. So let's take the first one from this, moving away from focusing on discrete grammar items. So it's very I'm still surprised in 2022, I still see many teachers give students tasks like this. Yeah, write 5 sentences about yourself using the present simple, for example. So what is wrong with this task? Can you tell me? Can you please type in the chat box? Do you see anything wrong with this task? And if so, what is wrong with it? Yeah, grammar term, yeah, limitations, the purpose, okay. Well, I'm not sure, I wouldn't say not clear what to write, because you write a sentence about yourself. It's kind of, yeah, I suppose as all writing tasks, this would normally be given at the end of a unit, yeah, after students probably have covered different rules of forming present simple. So now about yourself. So yeah, restriction. Yeah, I think what I particularly personally I don't like about this task is it's being unnecessarily restrictive. Yeah. So why do you have to limit students to writing using the present simple only? What if they already can produce something more sophisticated? So why not just simply frame it as write 5 sentences about yourself, or describe yourself using at least 5 sentences, which also kind of doesn't limit necessarily learners to writing 5 sentences. And stronger learners, stronger students may write more than 5. Also kind of tasks like this, like which is unnecessarily limit students to sort of using one structure or another, is kind of this assumption that learners acquire grammatical structures in this fixed linear order. So first they learn present simple, then they learn past simple or present, etc. But as we know, again, from second language acquisition research, language acquisition simply doesn't work like that. Yes. So for example, students may produce irregular past correctly. Yeah, they might say I saw, I went, but they still make mistakes with this past, with this form. When making negative sentences, they might still say I didn't saw or I didn't went, which is a very common mistake, sometimes even among B2 learners. Okay, so it's a kind of a misguided notion that learners are not able or not willing to say something about themselves using something else. For example, they can still they can say something about themselves using "I was born in a small village in the east of Russia," not necessarily present simple. And again, this "I was born in" may be taught or learned rather as a chunk without really delving fully into, you know, all the vagaries of past simple or whatever. So, and the other way around. So I mean, if you ask students, okay, you've practiced past simple, now write 5 sentences about yourself using past simple. Why limit them to past simple? There are many things you can say about your past by using actually present. For example, in English, you would say, you know, take an example, I was born in a small village. Yeah, you can say I come from a small village. So actually, this is something, this is talking about your past, but in English, to convey meaning here, to realize this function, we actually use the present simple structure. Yeah, I come from. To say I came from, as many learners do, would be actually incorrect in this case. Okay, all right, let's look at the next one. So word meanings, this shift from word meanings to vocabulary use. Now, again, the importance of teaching vocabulary has been sort of reappraised in the last 20-25 years. But unfortunately, it's not a very recent study, it's about 10 years old. It shows that vocabulary teaching as practiced, as it appears in course books, but also what teachers do in the classroom themselves. It teaches sort of discourse tend to focus particularly on teaching word meanings and kind of ignores other aspects of word knowledge. So as you see, this analysis of different course books at different levels shows that none of them really provide this sustained focus, sustained practice of other aspects of word knowledge, such as concept and reference, such as association, such as grammatical functions, yeah, such as collocations, which in my view is the most important component of language knowledge, but tend to focus specifically on teaching meanings. And similar studies focusing on teachers' discourse also show that 70% of all teaching episodes in the classroom tend to focus on teaching what words mean, rather than sort of providing definitions or translations, yeah, rather than focusing on how they should be used in context. Okay, and the last principle, from teaching skills to teaching, to teaching language as a basis of skill. So again, time and time again, I see how large portions of classroom time are devoted to teaching and practicing such skills as scanning and skimming at the expense of teaching language. And other authors seem to agree with me. For example, Scott Thondery, in this article on One Stop English, says, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, why do I assign slots in lesson plans, timetables, and course books to the teaching of reading? And why do such slots often consist of activities designed to practice the sub-skills, such as skimming, scanning, predicting, selecting, and inferring, etc.? Don't our students know how to read already? Have they never skimmed and scanned in their own language? Are they from Mars? So clearly he aims here to sort of provoke a debate. And of course, he himself makes some, further on in the article, he makes some qualifications as to that some skills are transferable, but others we need to give learners this push to help them transfer the skills from L1 to L2. But I like particularly the analogy he makes with, in the same article, with driving. So for example, said, okay, if you learn to drive in England, yes, so you drive on the left, and now you arrive in a European country, you need to drive. So you don't need to learn to drive all over again from scratch. So all you need to do is sort of make, you already know sort of basic principles that you need to stop at the red light, you should not, drive on the curb, etc. So all you need to do is sort of make certain adjustments to your driving habits, but you don't need to relearn them from scratch. Okay, and Catherine Wallace sort of also agrees with us, saying that basically what is important is to focus on a language our students need to be able to read. Sort of instead of teaching them those survival skills as like, you know, read the first sentence in the paragraph, or you don't need to understand every single word. Those are kind of techniques in case you do not have this critical mass of language available. But our primary goals as teachers should be actually focusing on teaching a language rather than skills. So so she says that basically reading abilities can be generalized across languages, even languages using different scripts. So learners, you know, Arabic speakers or Chinese speakers or Hebrew speakers, that, you know, languages that use different scripts can still transfer their skills to English. But what they do need is actually to improve their overall general second language competence, in other words, vocabulary and grammar. And I'm afraid my time is up. So I would like to, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the chat box, and I'll make this presentation available so you can also have access to my to the slides with all the references that I've included. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leo. Thank you for your insightful talk. Dear colleagues, if you have any questions, you may type them in the chat. Okay. Leo, are you planning to come to Russia soon?
Well, I'm hope so. Yes, I'm hopefully at the beginning of June.
Oh, okay. That's great.
Yeah. Once the all the border restrictions are lifted and this whole, you know, the process of crossing borders has become a bit easier.
We do hope so.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you once again. Yeah. I see there are no questions actually. If I'm not mistaken, the colleagues, when they just prepared this information about your talk, there was a kind of book which was mentioned. Can you say a few words about that?
Oh yes, yeah. Sorry, yeah. I wasn't sure if I should, you know, if I can.
Yeah. Why not? Why not? It's the right moment. It's the right moment. Yeah.
But the activities, the practical activities and examples I mentioned, they all come from my new book. From my latest. Hold on a second. It's called Activities for Alternative Assessment, published with published by Delta, who kindly agreed to sponsor this talk. So thank you to Delta as well. It's part of their series called Ideas in Action.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a couple of other titles in the book. There's actually one already that came out after my activities for alternative assessment on mediation activities. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that was it. There was a question here in the chat, I believe, again, about assessing vocabulary. I'm just trying to.
Yes, Tatiana just said, yeah.
How to vocabulary range and accuracy. Well, again, I'm kind of now tempted to say, well, you can find some ideas in my book, but it just well, again, there are many techniques. Again, of course, the best way to assess vocabulary is to assess vocabulary in use, yeah, in how actually learners produce vocabulary. But you can also create all kinds of assessment tools which focus not necessarily on the word meanings, but how learners can on use. For example, let's take an example of synonyms. Yeah, so many synonyms, even though they mean more or less the same, but they behave differently grammatically. So if we take, for example, afraid, yeah, you would say afraid of, but let's say frightened, yeah, its near synonym would be frightened by, you wouldn't say frightened of. So for example, you create this kind of like gap fill exercise sentences where learners have to provide the correct form, afraid or frightened, but not being sort of, which is not dictated by the meaning, because if you look at the meaning, both afraid and frightened would fill the gap, but they should really look at how it's used. So for example, if they see of, well, clearly it should be afraid of and not frightened. So this is just sort of one activity that came to mind, how you can focus on vocabulary use rather than just meaning. Okay.
Leo, I've got one question. I'm actually interested in using AI in language assessment. What's your attitude to using? Do you think it's the distant future or nearest future when AI will assess students?
Artificial intelligence.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I was actually a couple of years ago, I was asked to be this sort of consultant on this. Even though I myself am an examiner, I'm a Cambridge examiner, so it's kind of ironic that I was taking part in this project that will, if successful, it will eventually make me redundant. But what I understood from the creators of this project, that basically what does assesses learners. So it's quite good at assessing certain things, but not. So for example, of course, a vocabulary range would be easy to assess because you can simply count the number of what we call tokens. Yeah, the number of words, of different kinds of words learners use in a certain sample. Yes, so for example, they use so many different words, or we call them tokens, in a certain stream of speech, a paragraph, etc. But when it comes to assessing sort of range of vocabulary, this artificial intelligence was quite effective, but it was less effective in assessing many other kind of things, such as cohesiveness. Okay. So I think it's a long way off. We won't be made. So if there are any other examiners here in the audience, we won't be made redundant anytime soon.
Okay. Yes, it's really promising because it's one of the teachers' concerns. Yeah. Okay.
And there are some questions about. I think it's more addressed to you about the recording from Olga.
Yeah. We'll send out recordings. After the webinars, because I now have your registration details, so the links to the recording will be sent to you next week.
There's one question. I don't know if I can share. It came to me sort of as a private message, as a direct message, but I think Viola wouldn't mind if I shared it. Maybe she made a mistake sharing the direct message. It's a very interesting question. Do you think that what sometimes goes wrong with designing good assessments is that they aren't aligned with lesson or course objectives? Will the problem with poorly designed tasks and assessments be fixed if we learn how to set good learning objectives? I believe yes. The answer is yes. I think that it is very important to align, and that's what I meant in a way when I talked about alignment of assessment and learning. So I think yes, one of the ways for teachers themselves to improve their assessment skills is in a way to learn how to set good learning objectives sort of for each, even for part of the lesson. So in this part of the lesson, I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on, so for example, again, let's take vocabulary as an example. It's unrealistic to expect sort of learners to immediately grasp the meaning of new items and be able to use them. So it should be done sort of in small incremental steps. So the first step, of course, let them to be able to recognize vocabulary before recognize new vocabulary, even like if, for example, in listening, before they themselves can start incorporate, because very often we kind of expect learners immediately to especially with grammar, to learn new structure and then immediately start applying it. Like my early example with, okay, now you learned past simple, now write 5 sentences about past simple, kind of bypassing this crucial recognition stage, or it's also known as sort of receptive grammar. It's just being able to recognize sort of grammatical structure. And I think many assessment tasks should be based around that as well. So, for example, not just getting students to produce correct grammar, but also recognize correct grammar. So, for example, a very simple task would be underline all examples of in this short text. So like present perfect, after you've taught letters present perfect, instead of getting them to produce it, simply ask them, give them a task, find all examples of present perfect. Or if you taught them of different, because present perfect is essentially there are two main uses. Yes, there was one for completed events that have in the past, and something that's still going on, like what we call experiences. So you can underline all examples of present perfect in this text, and then decide whether it refers to this function, or that second function of present perfect. So these are kind of what are called receptive grammar tasks, would be also very effective.
Thank you very much, Leo. Would you also, at the end of our meeting today, say maybe a few words about the other books you've written, because maybe the audience don't know them?
Oh, yeah.
The motion minute, yeah.
I assume that, the audience know me and my books, yeah. You're right. Thank you, Evgeny, for giving this. Yeah. Well, my other book, which I don't have to hand, unfortunately, is my first book, but I kind of assumed, perhaps somewhat arrogantly, that because after it came out, my book, Lexical Grammar, it came out in 2018, so already 4 years ago, I kind of toured Russia extensively, promoting this book. And my tour took me to Moscow, obviously St. Petersburg, Ekaterinburg. So I did lots of web talks and even sort of mini courses based on lexical grammar, which was published by Cambridge University Press 4 years ago. So I kind of, as I said, somewhat arrogantly assumed that many of the members of the audience might know that book already. But again, thank you, Evgeny, for giving me the opportunity to mention it.
Yeah, just to raise awareness. Yeah. Because some of the participants, I believe, is the first time they've seen you. So
yeah. So with your permission, I'll just I'll drop the links in the chat box. Yeah.
Okay.
So
great.
This link I've shared is the latest book, the one that inspired this presentation, on alternative assessment, and the previous one, which you asked me about, is this one.
And dear colleagues, don't forget that the book from Delta is available with Anara, so don't hesitate to apply to Anara for the book. Yeah, it's promotion moment for Anara. Okay.
And Natalie, thank you. I'm really pleased. I'm really honored to hear that you have read or you are reading this book at the moment. And Anastasia. Evgeny, I think you're on mute.
Okay, thank you very much, Leo. It was a really, again, for me personally, insightful talk and practical talk. And yeah, so thank you very much. And I hope to see you in other events, online, offline in Russia. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, dear colleagues, it's the end of our session today, and we'll be pleased to get some responses from you, maybe some feedback from you. Thank you very much. And our next webinar will be in February. We'll let you know about the date. Thank you. Have a nice evening.